Come here. Pretend you're mine. She thought he was testing her until the Korean Billionaire Mafia CEO pulled her into his side, and the warmth of his hand against her waist felt nothing like a test. It was supposed to be a shield, a performance staged to silence his dangerously obsessive ex, but something in the way he held her, like she was both fragile and formidable, made pretending feel like the most dangerous truth she'd ever stumbled into. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. The Crown Pavilion Hotel was the kind of place where money didn't just talk, it gave speeches. Every chandelier dripped crystal, every corner smelled of fresh orchids and old wealth, and the annual winter gala was the city's most coveted invitation. Omara smoothed the front of her fitted navy blazer, her brown fingers straightening the lanyard around her neck that marked her as staff in a room full of royalty. 7 months as personal coordinator to the hotel's VP of events, and she still caught herself holding her breath in rooms like this one, as though taking up too much air might get her removed. She was cross-checking vendor confirmations on her tablet when the room changed. Not loudly, not with fanfare, just a subtle collective shift, the way a crowd unconsciously parts for something it both fears and desires. Jae-won Shin walked in. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. The billionaire CEO of Shin Global moved like the room existed to accommodate him. His black suit so perfectly cut it looked like architecture. His expression so controlled it looked like sculpture. Amara had read his name in financial headlines, had heard the whispers from senior staff about his family's reach, how Shin Global's boardrooms were only the polished surface of something far older and far darker underneath. The kind of man who could close a deal and close a chapter on someone's life with the same quiet efficiency. She looked back at her tablet. Men like Jae-won Shin were weather. You didn't engage with weather. You just tried not to get caught in it. Jae-won. The voice was velvet stretched over steel. Amara glanced up instinctively. The woman cutting through the crowd toward him wore a blood-red gown and a smile sharp enough to draw blood. Soo-yeon Baek, sole heir to the Baek fashion empire, and from the proprietary way she moved toward him, something far more personal than a business acquaintance. Her beauty was aggressive, the kind that had been cultivated and weaponized over years of practice. Jae-won's expression didn't soften, not even slightly. Soo-yeon? His voice was a closed door. Don't be like that. She placed her hand on his arm, the way people touch things they believe belong to them. We need to talk. You can't keep pretending that what happened between us was nothing. Our families have been in discussion. My father and yours have already agreed on the terms, and your father and mine can discuss whatever they like. My answer won't change. You're embarrassing me. Her voice dropped, the social polish cracking just enough to show something jagged underneath. Everyone here is watching you treat me like I'm nothing. You've been alone for months. No explanation, no one knew. People are starting to ask questions, Jae-won, and I'm running out of answers to give them. Amara had been gradually stepping backward toward a potted fern when she made the mistake of looking up at exactly the wrong moment. Or perhaps the right one. Jae-won's eyes found hers across the width of the room, like he had been looking for her specifically. His gaze was dark, sharp, and suddenly full of something that looked like calculation tipping into decision. She watched it happen in real time and felt her stomach hollow out. He moved toward her in 5 deliberate strides, and before she could form a single rational thought, his hand was around hers, warm and steady, and he was pulling her gently but unmistakably forward. "There you are." His voice was low, unhurried, intimate in a way that scattered her thoughts like startled birds. "I was looking for you." Amara's mouth opened. Nothing useful came out. His hand settled at the small of her back, and the contact sent something electric racing up her spine. Behind him, Soo-yeon had gone the kind of still that precedes eruption. "Who is this?" Soo-yeon's voice was glass on the edge of shattering. "This is Amara." He said her name like he had said it 100 times before, like it lived comfortably in his mouth. "She's mine." The declaration detonated quietly in the middle of all that glittering politeness. Amara felt the room's attention swing toward them like a compass needle finding north. Every sensible instinct she possessed told her to step back, to clarify, to protect the career she had sacrificed so much to build. Instead, she turned slightly into him, her hand finding the lapel of his jacket, and she felt the almost imperceptible catch in his breathing beneath her palm. "Yours." Soo-yeon's laugh was a beautiful, brittle thing. "She works here, Chae-won. Is this truly what you want to present to everyone in this room? This is desperation dressed up as a statement." Something moved behind Chae-won's eyes. Cold, deliberate, final. But when he looked down at Amara, his expression did something she hadn't expected. It softened. Deliberately or not, she couldn't be certain, but it looked terrifyingly real. "Be very careful," he said quietly, not looking away from Amara's face. "You're talking about the woman who matters most to me." Amara's heart was conducting its own private emergency. He tilted her chin up with 2 fingers, and his thumb grazed the line of her jaw with a gentleness entirely inconsistent with the reputation that followed him like a shadow. "Come here," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Pretend you're mine. Just tonight, please." That last word arrived stripped of armor, raw and unexpectedly human, and it undid something in her chest she hadn't known was fastened. Amara had spent years being measured, composed, invisible by design, in rooms that hadn't been built with her in mind. But something about the way he said, "please," like he was genuinely asking rather than commanding, made all her careful architecture crack. "You're going to kiss me now, aren't you?" she said. It was not entirely a question. "Only if you'll let me." She didn't stop him. His lips met hers with a restraint that somehow made it worse, careful and deliberate, and then her fingers curled into his jacket, and something shifted, and it stopped being careful entirely. It became something she didn't have a clean word for. When they separated, both of them slightly altered. Soo-yeon was gone. The crowd had returned to its champagne, with fresh material for tomorrow's gossip columns, and Jae-won was looking at her the way you look at something that has just permanently rearranged your priorities. "Thank you," he said quietly. His hands were still cradling her face. "That was unconscionable of me." Amara located her voice somewhere in the wreckage of her composure. "It was reckless, possibly career-ending. I was going to say, complicated." The corner of his mouth moved, "But yours are more accurate." He stepped back, and she felt the absence of his warmth, like a sudden drop in temperature. "Let me make it right. Dinner tomorrow. Let me explain everything." "Explain how you recruited a stranger as a human decoy in front of Seoul's most well-connected gossips." "When you describe it that way, I sound significantly worse." but his eyes were warm in a way that contradicted his reputation entirely. I promise the full picture is more complicated and probably more ridiculous than you're expecting. One dinner. Amara knew the sensible answer. The sensible answer lived in a very specific direction, and it was not toward this man. One dinner, she said anyway, and you tell me everything. Everything. He drew a card from his inside pocket and pressed it into her hand, his fingers staying a moment longer than necessary. My direct line. Send me your address. I'll collect you at 7. He was already turning to leave. Then he paused. Amara. She met his gaze. Whatever you felt just now, standing there. She said nothing. I felt it too, and I've spent a long time feeling nothing. So I thought you should know. Then the crowd folded around him and he was gone, and she was standing alone holding a card that felt heavier than cardstock had any right to, with the memory of his mouth still warm on hers and her phone already in her hand. Every reasonable part of her brain filed formal objections. She typed her address anyway and told herself she would regret it by morning. That standing there in the chandelier light, with something alive and reckless blooming in her chest, regret felt very far away. The black car arrived at Amara's apartment building in Mapogu at exactly 7 o'clock. Because of course, Jae-won Shin was the kind of man for whom punctuality was a form of control. She watched from upstairs as he stepped out before his driver could reach the door, dressed in dark trousers and a charcoal shirt with the top button open. He looked expensive and slightly dangerous, the way certain things do when they are both beautiful and capable of harm. She had changed 3 times. Her friend had declared the final choice, a deep burgundy dress with clean lines, and told her she looked like a woman who made bad decisions look inspired. Judging by the way Chae-won's eyes moved over her when she stepped outside, her friend had diagnosed correctly. You look exceptional, he said, his voice dropping in a way her nervous system was not prepared for. You look like you're about to take me somewhere that has no prices on the menu, she returned, because she needed to keep at least 1 foot on solid ground. His laugh arrived unexpectedly and landed beautifully. I haven't laughed like that in a while, he said, almost to himself. I noticed that about you last night. You don't perform for me. It's disorienting. The restaurant had no sign outside. It occupied a quiet street in Cheongdam-dong and operated on the kind of exclusivity that didn't bother with advertising. They were shown to a private room where floor-length windows framed a stone garden lit by low lanterns, and the sound of water moving slowly over rocks made the silence between them feel less like a gap and more like something being carefully considered. You promised me the full story, Amara said, once they were alone with tea poured and neither of them pretending to look at the menu. I'm here. Talk. Chae-won leaned back, watching her with those precise, measuring eyes. What do you already know? That you run one of Korea's largest conglomerates? That your family has connections that go considerably beyond corporate? That Soo-yeon Baek has been publicly linked to you for years? And that whatever is happening between your families, you want it out badly enough to involve a complete stranger? Soo-yeon was never a relationship. She was an arrangement drafted before either of us was old enough to have opinions about it. 2 families who built empires in the same shadows, deciding that a merger made sense. He turned his tea glass slowly in his hands. I have been refusing for years. Recently, the pressure moved past negotiation. How far past? Far enough that people I trust have started receiving messages, encouraging them to encourage me. The kind of messages that don't come with return addresses. He said it without drama, the way you describe something you have made peace with, which Amara found more unsettling than if he had seemed frightened. And the solution you arrived at, she said carefully, was to use your hotel's event coordinator as a prop. The solution I arrived at in a moment of desperation, when I saw someone looking at me with absolutely no interest in impressing me, which is rarer than you would imagine. His eyes held hers steadily. I want to be honest with you, Amara, because I told you last night I felt something real, and I meant it, and I don't say things I don't mean. Not anymore. Can I ask you something honestly first? Go ahead. Why did you play along? She considered lying. It would have been easier. Because you said please, she said finally. And it sounded like you hadn't said it in a very long time, and meant it. The look that crossed his face then was not the expression of a man accustomed to being seen. It was quieter than that, more exposed. Tell me something true, he said. Something you don't usually offer. Amara set down her cup. I've been in Seoul for 4 years. I came here after a career setback back home that made me feel like the city I'd grown up in had decided I'd reached my ceiling. My mother thought I'd lost my mind. A black woman relocating to a country where she'd be conspicuous every single day. But I was tired of being overlooked in familiar places. Here, at least, people see me. They might not always know what to do with what they see, but they're not pretending I'm not there. Chae-won was quiet for a moment. Then, I know something about being visible and still profoundly alone. Is that what it's like, being who you are? Being who I am means every person in every room is either after something or afraid of something. Neither makes for honest company. He held her gaze. My grandfather made his money in ways that didn't survive scrutiny. My father spent decades cleaning it into legitimacy. The structure is respectable now, but the roots are what they are, and the people connected to those roots don't retire gracefully. Should I be concerned about my safety? Honestly? Possibly. He said it without flinching. I think you deserve to know that. I grew up in Baltimore, Amara said. Danger has worn many faces in my life. Yours is not the most frightening version I've encountered. Something shifted in him. A very controlled, very contained version of relief. Then let me ask you something impractical and probably unfair. His hand moved across the table, and when his fingers found hers, the contact was tentative, in a way that had no business belonging to a man with his reputation. Let me see you again. And again after that. Give this enough room to become something honest. I know what I'm asking. I know my world is complicated and my family is worse. And I'm asking you to step into all of that with open eyes. You're asking me to be your real girlfriend who started as a fictional one while you dismantle a family arrangement that comes with implied threats. Yes. No hesitation. I am asking exactly that. That's an objectively terrible idea. I know. He turned her hand over gently, his thumb tracing a slow line across her palm. Say yes, anyway. Amara looked at him. The careful architecture of him, the controlled surface and the loneliness underneath it. The way he was asking for something he clearly didn't know how to ask for. She thought about the safe version of her life, the one with predictable hours and manageable risks. Then she thought about how awake she felt sitting in this room with this man who looked at her like she was the most coherent thing in his world. Yes, she said quietly. but nothing hidden. No strategy that leaves me uninformed. If we're doing this, we do it as a unit. No more shadows, he agreed, and brought her hand to his lips. The kiss to her knuckles was brief and devastating. Starting tonight. Starting tonight, she repeated, and the promise between them settled like the first word of a story neither of them could yet finish. 3 weeks into it, Amara understood she was in the kind of trouble that doesn't announce itself loudly. There had been no dramatic intrusions, no ominous visitors, no sign of Soo-yeon beyond a single cold look across a hotel lobby that Amara had met without blinking. The trouble was quieter and considerably more permanent than any of that. The trouble was that she was falling, genuinely and thoroughly, for a man she had promised herself was temporary. Chae-won had been relentlessly honest. He showed her his life in careful installments, the calls that happened after midnight in languages and tones that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings, the way staff in certain establishments went very still when he entered, the small scar along his left forearm that he traced absent-mindedly sometimes when he was thinking through something difficult. He shared it all in fragments, lying beside her in the early morning hours, while Seoul went quietly gold outside his penthouse windows. And she had shown him hers. The grief of being far from home during the wrong seasons. The exhaustion of being the representative of an entire identity in every room she entered. The career she had designed for herself before life had redesigned it for her. He listened like her words carried mass. He remembered things she had mentioned once in passing. He made room for the complicated, uncurated version of her without appearing to require the simpler one. Which was how she found herself at 11 at night in his apartment, still in the green dress she'd worn to an art opening, watching him pour whiskey at the bar with hands that had held her face with extraordinary tenderness not 2 hours before. "You've gone quiet in a specific way," he said, his back to her. "What happened?" "Soo-yeon was at the opening tonight." His shoulders shifted, nearly imperceptibly. "Did she approach you?" "No, she watched, the entire evening, with an expression that wasn't anger." Amara paused. "It was patience, the kind people have when they're waiting for something they're certain is coming." Chae-won set down the decanter. When he turned around, his expression was composed in a way that told her he was about to say something he had been organizing for some time. "I need to tell you something." The quality of the silence changed. "My family has decided to move forward. There's a shareholders' meeting in 5 weeks. They intend to announce a formal arrangement between Soo-yeon and me at that meeting. They've communicated that your presence in my life is considered a temporary disruption. Their word was that it would be managed." Amara set her glass down with deliberate care. "Managed? Yes. When did you find out?" His silence arrived before any words, which was its own answer. "Chae-won, how long have you known?" 12 days. The sting of it was sharper than she had braced for, given that she had walked into this arrangement with her eyes open. But somewhere in the last 3 weeks, she had stopped treating it like an arrangement. "You told me no more shadows." "I know." He crossed the room toward her, and she held her position, not retreating, but not yielding. "I was trying to build a way out before I had to put this on you. I am still trying. But the board answers to my family, and my family is not accustomed to losing." "So the plan was to keep me comfortable and uninformed while you worked out how to handle it?" "No." The word was immediate and almost forceful. "The plan, such as it was was to find a resolution that didn't require you to carry any of this. But you asked me not to do things alone, and you were right to ask. He stopped just in front of her. I'm not marrying her. I want to be precise about that. I would rather reduce everything my family built to its component parts than let them dictate this. And in the time it takes you to do that, what am I? You are the reason I want to do it. His voice was stripped of everything performative. 3 weeks ago, I was going through the motions of a life I had never chosen. I was functioning. I was not living. And then you walked into that ballroom, looking like you owned every inch of space you occupied. And you looked at me with those eyes that had absolutely no interest in being impressed. And something in me woke up, Amara. I did not plan this. I did not plan you. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, if you want this, then stop trying to handle it without me. Go to your family, tell them directly, not through lawyers, not through board maneuvers. Look them in the eye and tell them you are choosing something else. You understand what they'll do. They will come for your credibility, your career. They'll make it costly. Let them. Her voice was steady in a way that surprised even her. I have been building a life in borrowed spaces since I was 22. I know how to stand in a room that doesn't want me and take up space anyway. Your family's disapproval is not the most hostile environment I've navigated. Not even close. Chae-won stared at her for a long moment, and the expression on his face was something she had not seen on him before. It looked very much like awe. You mean that? Every word. But I need you to be completely in. No more information I don't have. No more protecting me from things I've already agreed to walk into. We stand in this together, or we don't stand in it at all. He reached for her slowly, his forehead coming to rest against hers, and she heard him exhale something that had been held a long time. Together, he said softly, whatever that costs. She kissed him this time, and it was not the careful, staged thing from the ballroom or the gentle exploration of new territory. It was declarative, a line drawn. When they broke apart, something in his eyes had changed, had gone from controlled to combustible. 5 weeks, he said. That's how long we have to restructure enough that they lose their leverage over the company. It'll be a war. Then we'd better get started. She held his gaze. Think you're ready to burn it down? His smile arrived slowly, and it was the most dangerous, beautiful thing she had ever been in the immediate vicinity of. With you standing next to me? Absolutely. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her with a sureness that felt like something already decided. Amara thought about the careful, manageable life she could have continued to live. Then she looked at this man who had stumbled into her orbit out of desperation and accidentally made her feel more known than years of safety ever had. She didn't need a guarantee. She just needed to be willing to leap. She was willing. Please like and subscribe, and check out our playlist for more stories just like this one.